Welcome to my presentation, the suitability of re-mining as a remediation method of beryllium and tungsten skarn tailings in Yxsjöberg, Sweden. And in my PhD project, we have been working and focusing on beryllium and tungsten because both of them are known as or identified as EU critical raw materials in the European Union. This means that they have a high economic importance to maintain the living standard we have today, but also to develop a green technology to maintain a sustainable society. However, there is a supply risk since most of these metals are produced outside of EU, and therefore the European Union are striving for a higher internal production. Another thing with many of these EU critical raw materials are that they are found in low concentrations in the pristine environment, and therefore we don't know so much about their geochemical behavior or their toxicity. However, as we increase the production, there is a risk that the flux and circulation of these elements will increase, and therefore we need to have this understanding to be able to have responsible mine and wastewater management. The site that we're working with is called Yxsjöberg. It's located in west of Stockholm, which you can see here. And here on this orthophoto taken in 1963, you can see that the ore lenses are lying here, and they were mining tungsten, copper, and fluorite in between 1918 and 1989. The tailings were deposited into Smaltjärnen Repository in between 1918 and 1963. So you can see here that there are no dams controlling the tailings, and no cover was put on top of the tailings until 1993. So the tailings were exposed to oxygen for more than 30 years. This is quite problematic because we know now that the tailings have high concentrations of sulfides, fluoride, and carbonates. We also have a high abundance of the unusual mineral called danelite, which consists of both sulfur and silica and can oxidize, similar to pyrrhotite. We also have scheelite, a calcium tungstate, which is known from previously to be a very stable mineral, but reports have seen that carbonates actually can exchange with tungstate and mobilize tungsten. So this complex mineral matrix makes this system potential concern for the environment, but also a place where we can study the geochemical behavior of these elements. In between 1969 and 1989, the tailings were deposited into Morkulltjärnen Repository, and this repository was covered and water saturated directly after closure. So here we can also compare the old settings to the new ones and see how they both have affected geochemistry. So the aim of this study was to look at the mobility, the fate, and the environmental impact of beryllium and tungsten from the Smaltjärnen tailings repository, and compare the results to the surface water downstream Morkulltjärnen Repository, and also to evaluate the need for remediation, and if so, the possibility to use re-mining as a remediation method, since both beryllium and tungsten are EU critical raw materials. We were sampling intact tailings cores in 5 locations. We also looked at groundwater in 3 of these locations. We have hand-picked minerals from rock-drilled cores, and we have looked at 6 surface water locations downstream of the tailings. 3 of them are downstream Smaltjärnen Repository, 1 is downstream Morkulltjärnen Repository, and 2 of them are where the 2 waters have mixed with each other. These results were compared to a reference sample from another catchment area. And in 4 of these locations, we also sampled diatoms in the water column to use them as bioindicators to see if the mine drainage have had a negative impact on ecosystems. So by combining geochemistry with mineralogy, we could see that in the upper parts, we have oxidized tailings, and there pyrrhotite has oxidized. Calcite has been completely depleted due to neutralization. We have secondary formations of gypsum and hydrospheric oxides, and the pH has decreased from above 8 to below 4. We can also see that the carbonates from the calcite has been transported downwards and accumulated where the pH conditions are above 7. There we found secondary calcite, but we could also see that water-soluble tungsten was present, indicating that we have this exchange between anion exchange between carbonates and tungstate within the tailings. In the oxidized tailings, we could also see that the danelite, the beryllium mineral, had weathered, first by oxidation and then intensified by the acid produced from the sulfides. We also found that beryllium have a very complex geochemical behavior. When we used 7-step sequential extraction, we could see that beryllium had both entered hydrospheric oxides, some type of aluminum fluoride complexes, and also we hypothesized that beryllium had entered secondary gypsum because we could see a strong correlation between calcium, sulfur, and beryllium in receiving waters. And also therefore we also hypothesized that the major source of beryllium to the water was from the secondary gypsum. When we look at the groundwater, we can see that calcium and sulfur are the major elements in the molar ratios of gypsum. We can also see that in one of the water wells, in P7, we have high concentrations of aluminum, beryllium, fluorine, and zinc. And 4.5 milligrams per liter of beryllium is probably one of the highest concentrations measured globally. If we look at the two other wells, we can see that the concentrations are below the detection limits. There, during sampling, we found a white sludge that we unfortunately couldn't sample, but we, based on this data, we conclude that this white sludge consists of some type of aluminum, beryllium, fluorine, and zinc complexes that is scavenging some part of beryllium within the tailings. We can also see that tungsten was found in elevated concentrations in the groundwater. Moving over to the surface water, we see here the elements that were found in enriched concentrations. It's beryllium, calcium, fluorine, and sulfur. And the red lines represent threshold values. And beryllium is way above the threshold values, while fluorine is on the margin, and calcium and sulfur are not found in the toxic concentrations. You can also see here that it's only the samples from downstream Smaltjärnen that is found in high concentrations. Moving over to iron and tungsten, they were transported both in the dissolved and the particulate fraction, and we could see that even though we had high concentration just below Smaltjärnen, iron concentration decreased rapidly and were similar to the reference sample just a few hundred meters away. So we hypothesized that iron had settled into the sediment, also bringing tungsten and bismuth to the sediments. However, if we focus on the samples taken downstream Morkulltjärnen, we can see that these samples were actually above the threshold values for aquatic organisms during all sampling occasions. And we can see that also water downstream was enriched in tungsten. Trying to illustrate this, we can see that from Smaltjärnen Repository, we had dissolved concentrations of beryllium and fluoride, while hydrospheric oxide settled tungsten and bismuth into the sediments. When we looked at the taxonomy of the diatoms, we could see that we had metal-tolerant species that were abundant in more than 50%, indicating that there is a negative impact on the ecosystems from the mine drainage. However, when we look at the water downstream Morkulltjärnen, we also see that there we have another type of species, but still a metal-tolerant one, being more than 50% of the taxonomy, showing that a higher pH and the occurrence of tungsten probably also have a negative impact on the water quality and the ecosystems. Both these diatom species were found also in C14. indicating that the negative or the low water quality mine drainage were transported more than 2 kilometers downstream the tailings. So the low quality mine drainage with beryllium and fluoride and the impact on diatoms stressed the need for remediation. And we know that only a small part of the tailings have weathered so far, so this release will be ongoing for hundreds of years. Pyrite oxidation is the direct or indirect effect of beryllium and tungsten mobilization. Cover and water saturation could prohibit sulfide and dandellite oxidation and fluorite weathering. However, we need to take into consideration that high concentrations of tungsten were released from Morkulltjärnen, which makes cover and water saturation less suitable. And this is when we can start to talk about re-mining, because we could see that if we were to reprocess the tailings, we could extract economic minerals and metals like scheelite, fluorite, and bismuthinite. This needs more studies. We could use inert materials. We had 88% of the tailings that were silicates. And the elements, the minerals that we now know is a potential threat for the environment, we could store in a proper way. And by doing this, we would remove the environmental impact from this site. Thank you very much for listening.